seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'm John Dickerson. Join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7. Hello and welcome to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. It has only been 1 month. 1 month ago, the delegates gathered here in the United Center were expecting to cheer Joe Biden as their nominee. Now, on this first night of their gathering, they will cheer him, perhaps louder than ever, but not to lift him into the nomination. Instead, to lift him into the Democratic pantheon, where he will watch the party's new champion, his chosen successor, and Vice President Kamala Harris, who in 4 weeks has consolidated her party, reversed its fortunes in the political polls, and surprised observers by tapping a well of enthusiasm and donations. Political conventions seek to draw the country's attention, but the events of the last month have been far more dramatic and attention-grabbing than the staged events of these 4-year affairs. Now, the next set of tests for the young campaign, using these 4 days in Chicago to take advantage of the risky gambit that so far has paid off. I'm joined here by our CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent, Robert Costa, and bringing in CBS News' Jerika Duncan, who is in the studio in New York.
That's right. I want to start off by asking both of you a couple of questions. Thanks, John. What is the mood like, though, if you could just sort of give us a sense of what it's like right now, just not only inside the convention, but also around as day one of the DNC kicks off?
Well, you think about conventions, Jerika, they're often emotional events as much as political events. 1964, Robert F. Kennedy, after the death of his brother in 1963, ovation after ovation in Atlantic City, New Jersey. The Kennedy family, those figures, RFK, JFK, heroes to President Biden, who will be on stage tonight. And there is a sense of emotional electricity in this room about a president who decided on his own to exit the race. But any kind of decision can be heart-wrenching. I think about Lyndon Johnson when he made that decision in March 31st, 1968, the cover of your book, The Hardest Job in the World, that hand on the table. I mean, it is the hardest job in the world, and these are the hardest decisions for the person with the hardest job in the world to make.
Absolutely, and also a lifetime in politics, as you know so well, Bob. Having talked to him, this is the end of a career that has been marked by getting back up. And this is a situation in which that's a different act for him. One other thing, Jerika, that I picked up on, I talked to somebody here who had been trying to get folks to come to the convention and had a bunch of extra hotel rooms. Then a month ago, something happened, and this person said the hotel rooms are packed. Everybody is rushing to come to Chicago. The flip in the change in the momentum in and interest in this race among Democrats, that's just one little way in which the momentum has changed within this party.
What are you both going to be watching and listening for tonight? I heard earlier on America Decide, Ed O'Keefe said that someone shouted out to the president when he was getting ready, if you will, is this going to be bittersweet? And he said it's going to be a memorable moment. What are you listening for, though, in particular?
I'll be watching, beyond all the emotional outpouring here for President Biden among Democrats. I mean, these are the rank and file Democrats. If you're a delegate, you care. You're a Biden delegate. You came here because you love Joe Biden, maybe going back to the 1970s. But what I'm watching tonight, Jerika, is what does President Biden say about Vice President Harris? The country, I was just talking to Bill Daley, the former Obama chief of staff, about this. The country, he said, frankly, doesn't care that much about who's vice president. It doesn't mean disrespect to the office, but that person's often out of the headlines. People here in the media, the delegates, the Democrats, they know Harris, right, but does the country know the vice president? And what does President Biden say to reassure people who are just starting to pay attention to this political figure?
Picking up on what Bob's saying, the president is a character witness for the nominee in two important ways. One, he picked her, he worked with her, but he also knows what it's like to be vice president. He can speak with real authority to define this nominee. Everybody who speaks in this convention has two tasks, and if they're not working on these tasks, then they are distracting. And those two tasks are helping to define Kamala Harris in a way that will be attractive to voters, and the second is a way to define the race in a way that voters see themselves in what the party is projecting, and also then, because it's so much about a negative impression about Donald Trump, see Donald Trump as antithetical to those things that Democrats are putting forward. If you're not defining the race or defining Kamala Harris, then you're not helping the Democratic Party in what it wants to achieve.
And John, I don't think this could be overstated enough. You know, this was supposed to be Biden's event. Now he's speaking on night one, asking people to support Vice President Kamala Harris. Can you put into perspective just what tonight and this entire week means to his legacy?
Well, as Bob was saying earlier, there's the personal and human crucible that any president goes through when they step out or when they face these moments of choosing. And so, but for Joe Biden in particular, you know, this is a moment where Kamala Harris is in the position she is in because of something he did. And when they talk about his record and how much he has done, you know, that will emerge from this convention either with a glowing uplift to the Biden story, or the party will move on. So how he is received and also how he fits into the story of the Democratic Party, that starts to be written here tonight with his speech, and then as the rest of this campaign goes on. All
right, John Dickerson and Robert Costa, thank you so much. And John, of course, we'll check in with you a little later for some last thoughts. Meanwhile, outside the DNC, protests are planned throughout the week. Groups are expected to hold marches and demonstrations calling for the end of U.S. support to Israel in its war with Hamas. Organizers said they expected about 20,000 people to turn out for a protest rally on the first day of the convention. As the Democratic National Convention kicks off in Chicago, the Trump campaign is making stops in key battleground states this week, starting with Pennsylvania. The former president gave remarks on the economy earlier today at a manufacturing facility in York. He later spoke exclusively to CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns about the race for the White House and the key issue of abortion rights.
Will you accept the results of this election?
Absolutely. I assume it's going to be a fair election. If it's going to be a fair and free election, the answer is absolutely I will.
What does fair mean to you?
It means the votes are counted. It means that votes are fair. It means that they don't cheat on the election. They don't drop ballots. They don't install new rules and regulations that they don't have the power to do. They don't use 51 intelligence agents to give phony reports, which had an effect on the election. They don't do many of the things that they did in the last election.
If you lose this election, will it have been legitimate?
If I see that we had a fair and free election, which I hope to be able to say, but if I see that, you will never see anybody more honorable than me. I'm an honorable person. You see the report that came out on Biden today from Congress with all of the money that was stolen.
But you didn't accept the results of the last election.
Well, that's right, because there were many problems with the last election. You know it.
Even though all of the legal cases were dropped.
No, they weren't brought because the judges wouldn't take them because they said it was after the election. Well, how else are you going to find out cheating until after the election? I think things have been done over the last 4-year period that will make this a free and fair election. And certainly, if for some reason I lose, and I think if I lose, this country will go into a tailspin, the likes of which it's never seen before, the likes of 1929. But if I do, and it's free and fair, absolutely I will accept the results.
We are 1 month removed from the assassination attempt on your life.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you are suffering any PTSD from that experience.
No, not at all. But I do, in thinking about it, it's a miracle that I wasn't killed, as you know. You saw the flight of the bullet and everything else. You saw, they say, 1/8 of an inch away, 1/8 of an inch. And there has to be a reason. And I do believe in God. I also believe perhaps God had a purpose that he wants to save this country. And I think that may have really been a reason. We have to save our country. Our country is going bad. We're a failed nation. We're failing very badly. You just take a look at the mess that's happening right now in Chicago. The answer is it was a very close call. 1/8 of an inch, and I wouldn't be talking to you right now. And I think God has a reason for doing things. And his reason might very well be that he wants to save this country, maybe save the world.
Have you suffered any other kinds of effects?
No, not at all. I haven't. I mean, I got better. I healed well, and I haven't. But it could have been very bad.
I want to ask you about the Supreme Court. Are you going to release a list of Supreme Court nominees that you would pick?
Yes, I will.
Anybody that's on that list right now?
I'll be releasing it, I'd say, over the next 3 or 4 weeks. I think the Democrats should do the same thing, but I'll be releasing. Last time I released a list of approximately 25 people, and I picked from that list. I think it's an important thing to do. I will be releasing a list over the next probably month or so.
You were influential in picking 3 Supreme Court justices to overturn Roe v. Wade. Do you have any regrets about the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
Well, they've wanted to overturn it for 52 years. For 52 years, they've worked to overturn Roe v. Wade. They wanted to bring it back to the states. All legal scholars, all Democrats, everybody wanted to bring it back. This is for years and decades and decades. And they brought it back to the states. And now the states are controlling it. It's in the hands of the states, and people are voting. And frankly, I believe in the exceptions, like Ronald Reagan believed in the exceptions. I think most Republicans do believe in the exceptions. And we are having a great response. Ohio voted, and by the way, they voted more liberally than some people would have thought. Kansas voted. Many of the states have voted or in the process of voting. And what it did is it brought it back to the states and allows the people to vote. And we can, after 52 years, we can clean up something that frankly has been a very hot bone of contention. We want to unify our country. And people have different thoughts on it and all. And I will say this, that in some cases it was a more liberal vote or a more progressive vote than some of these states would have thought. And in some cases, perhaps it'll be the other. But it's now in the hands of the people. And again, Democrats and Republicans, everybody wanted to do this for 52 years, and I got it done. And we should never be in the federal government. The federal government should have nothing to do with this issue. And it's being solved at a state level, and people are very happy about it.
So no regrets?
No regrets, no. I wouldn't have regrets. Again, I did something that most people felt undoable. They didn't want it in the federal government. It shouldn't be in the halls of the federal government. It should be in the state governments. And I was able to bring it back to the state governments, and now the people are voting. And again, they're voting in many cases with the exceptions, the 3 exceptions, like Ronald Reagan, like myself.
As president, would you enforce the Comstock Act, which could prohibit the sale of or the distribution of medication abortion by mail? No,
we will be discussing specifics of it, but generally speaking, no, I wouldn't.
You would not enforce the Comstock Act?
I would not do that.
Should medication abortion be widely available?
Well, it's going to be available, and it is now. And as I know it, the Supreme Court has said, keep it going the way it is. I will enforce and agree with the Supreme Court, but basically they've said keep it the way it is now.
CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me now with that great interview. I can only imagine sort of on the spot and being able to ask those questions about policy one after the next. Caitlin, let me ask you this, though. You know, the former president's view on abortion, is it in line, do you think, with the rest of the party? He talked very clearly about the Comstock Act, as you mentioned, and saying that certain things are legal and he doesn't really plan to change that. But how in line with what he said to you is in line with the rest of the party?
You know, Drika, it's fascinating to me because this was something that Republicans wanted, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And it was just notable a month ago in their convention. Rarely anybody mentioned it there because they know it's a liability for them in the general election here. And what's important to note, too, is that our own polling shows that majorities of voters are concerned about what these kinds of restrictions on abortion in these states have on people who are currently pregnant and what it means for their women's care, just physical care. So this is a defining issue in this election. And it was clear from that interview that Donald Trump doesn't want to say how he would vote on Florida's own measure to make it constitutionally legal to have abortion access in Florida. But he also said, Jerika, that he has no regrets about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I asked him twice. He said no regrets about that. So that's significant to note. But this is an issue that is an animating force for Democrats and also for independent voters and possibly those moderate voters that he's going to need to win over here, who are seeing the effects of some of these restrictions in their states.
The former president has not been shy to step up to the mic and speak and have various news conferences. But what is the Trump campaign's plan to counter Democrats' messaging during the party's convention this week, when all eyes are really on the DNC, and what policies and what positions Democrats plan to take to try and earn votes?
Yeah, Jerika, Donald Trump is in a position that he hasn't really been in the past several years, which is kind of out of the spotlight, out of the headlines. Kamala Harris and the Democrats are in the spotlight this week. They've been in the spotlight for pretty much the past month, as she has shown in polling, especially, that she's consolidated and rallied the Democratic Party base. And so what the Trump campaign is trying to do this week, they're going on a battleground state blitz, essentially, starting here in Pennsylvania, which, as you know very well, Jerika, is our lights are going over.
Oh,
There's a little wind here.
We're having a Hillary Clinton moment.
Sorry about that. It's a little windy here, but basically, Pennsylvania is a key state. So they're starting here, talking about the economy. They're going tomorrow to Michigan. They're going to be in Arizona, Nevada throughout the rest of this week, trying to offer counter program. The question is, can he stay on message?
Well, clearly you can stay on message even when the lights are falling down. I hope the crew is okay. And again, we thank you so much for your timing. Great interview.
We're all good. Our
Great
amazing
interview there.
crew. Yes, good.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you. As a reminder, our coverage of the DNC continues tonight with a special edition of America Decides at 7 p.m. Eastern. Coverage begins each day at 5 p.m. from now until Thursday, right here on CBS News. Still to come, Secretary Antony Blinken says an important step has been taken towards a potential ceasefire in Gaza. What we're learning from his talks in the Middle East this week, and what needs to happen before a deal is reached. Plus, expelled New York Congressman George Santos had his day in court today. We'll tell you about the plea deal he made and what it means for the former lawmaker. Stay with us. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Israeli leaders Monday and announced a bit of movement on negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza.
In a very constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu today, he confirmed to me that Israel accepts the bridging proposal, that he supports it.
Blinken also said it is now up to Hamas to also accept the proposal. The group's leaders said Sunday that the proposal being mediated by the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar skews in favor of Israel. But it is unclear if this one that Israel has agreed to addresses those concerns. Mediators are set to meet again this week. John Alterman joins us now. He is a senior vice president and director of the Middle East program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. John, thank you so much for joining us. What are the sticking points, as you know them, for Hamas in this ceasefire deal and hostage release proposal as of right now?
Well, the sticking points are really what we're talking about. What does a ceasefire mean? What does an Israeli troop withdrawal from Gaza mean? How long does the ceasefire last? Who is released, both in terms of the hostages, but also in terms of Palestinians in Israeli jails? I think there is probably some basic understanding that there's been narrowing over time, but exactly what's in, what's out, what the conditions are, under what conditions Israel can come back in, I think all of that is probably unsettled to both the Palestinians and I would guess to the Israelis a bit as well.
What is the significance of Israel retaining a military presence on the Gaza-Egypt border? And, to hear Netanyahu call the talks positive and say it happened in a good atmosphere, what is the likelihood that a ceasefire will actually be the case, seeing as though we've been talking about this for several months now?
It feels to me like we're not as close as the White House keeps saying we are. There are probably, I'm sure there are things I don't know, but it doesn't feel to me like either Netanyahu or Yahya Sinwar are about to stop fighting. I think that they still see an advantage is continuing. What Netanyahu is really interested in on the Egyptian border, there's something called the Philadelphia corridor that is the land along the border. Hamas has been burrowing under that land for more than a decade. And the Israelis had to rely on the Egyptians. The Egyptians really couldn't seal it. So the Israelis say, okay, we're going to retain control of that land, and we will make sure that Hamas doesn't burrow under it. The Egyptians say it's not acceptable for the Israelis to have a hermetic seal between Gaza and Egypt. I think the Americans are trying with some sort of technical fixes. There'll be sensors. The Israelis can watch the feeds. I think we are possibly close to some sort of agreement on that, but I haven't seen an agreement. And my guess is there's still going to be issues that the Egyptians and the Israelis are going to have to work out, not just what Tony Blinken told Benjamin Netanyahu he'd do today.
But this being his 9th trip there in the last 10 months, does it feel like we are getting somewhat closer? Or again, going back to what you're saying, the U.S. is maybe putting it out there as though we're a little bit closer than we actually are?
It doesn't look to me like we're that close because it seems to me that the stakes for both Sinwar and Netanyahu are so high. What they've invested in this war is so much that to give up fighting before you've gotten everything you want to get, I think is something that each side doesn't want to do. And frankly, politically, I don't see signs that either side feels it needs to do. The United States is very interested in preventing a regional war. and having the negotiations might delay it, but I'm not sure we'll get to peace.
Yeah, meanwhile, a lot of innocent lives lost and the hostages still waiting to come home, and the families of those hostages waiting for them to come home. John Alterman, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerika.
Thank you. 2 Americans are reportedly among the 6 people missing after a violent storm sank a yacht off the coast of Sicily Sunday. Officials say 22 people were on the boat when it capsized, 15 were rescued, and 1 person died. British entrepreneur Mike Lynch is also reportedly missing. He was recently acquitted of fraud charges against him by the U.S. government. A judge sentenced a Milwaukee abuse victim to 11 years in prison for killing the man who sex trafficked her as a teenager. Crystal Kaiser was also sentenced to 5 years of extended supervision, but the saga isn't over as Kaiser faces a possible life sentence for shooting her abuser who filmed his abuse of her for more than a year. Kaiser agreed to plead guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree reckless homicide with use of a dangerous weapon that carried a maximum sentence of 30 years in prison. Well, the family of Devontae Mitchell, a black man who was allegedly killed by 4 Milwaukee hotel workers in June, agreed to a settlement with the hotel this afternoon. Lawyers representing the family in a statement said, quote, "We are pleased to share that we have reached an amicable settlement. The terms of the agreement will be confidential." The 4 hotel workers were caught on camera pinning down and hitting Mitchell. His death was later ruled a homicide by the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner. The 4 workers now face felony murder charges related to Mitchell's death. They are scheduled for arraignment on Thursday. Former New York Congressman George Santos pleaded guilty today in his federal fraud case. The Republican faced 23 felony counts, including wire fraud, money laundering, and theft of public funds. He had previously pleaded not guilty to those charges, but later agreed to a plea deal. The case stems from accusations that Santos lied about his personal and professional background while running for Congress in 2022. That led to questions about his campaign funds. The House voted to expel him in December following an ethics investigation. The judge has estimated Santos would be sentenced to up to 8 years in prison. Well, nearly 500,000 undocumented migrants have a new pathway to U.S. residency and citizenship as of today. Our Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us after this break to go over some of the new protections and who qualifies for them. You're streaming The Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The Daily Report. I'm Jerika Duncan. Here are some additions to our top stories. Disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein will remain in custody in New York as he awaits his retrial on Manhattan rape and sexual assault charges. However, once the case is complete and depending on what the outcome is, Weinstein could go straight to California to serve a pending 16-year sentence on a separate conviction. The Manhattan retrial is set to begin in November. Prosecutors in former President Donald Trump's criminal hush money case are not explicitly opposing his bid to delay sentencing until after the election. In a letter to Judge Juan Marchand, attorneys acknowledged Trump's rights and deferred to Marchand's decision. Sentencing is currently set for September 18th. The Democratic National Convention kicks off in Chicago tonight. The big name speakers for the day one include President Biden 1 month after he exited the 2024 race. This week, more than 4,000 delegates will recognize Vice President Kamala Harris as the party's official nominee. As we mentioned earlier, protests are planned throughout the week at the Democratic National Convention calling for an end of U.S. aid to Israel and its war with Hamas. CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano joins me right now, and I can see a crowd sort of building up behind you. Lilia, set the scene for us in terms of where you are and what's happening.
Hey there, Drika. So what happened earlier was there was a rally followed by a march that went on very peacefully. Protesters ended up around this area, and apparently a group of protesters were able to use what we heard were sledgehammers to breach that part of the wall that you see there. As you can see, there are some holes on what is that perimeter fence that was created to keep the protests outside and away from the area of the arena where the DNC is taking place. So once they breached the fence, some protesters got through and started manifesting and chanting on that side. At that point, a group of police not in riot gear approached, were telling them to move. People weren't moving. And then a group of, as you see, these riot gear police from Chicago PD who are wearing these light blue helmets were able to assemble and start pushing the crowds in and telling people to move away. Protesters started saying, come out, come out. Some of them remained. A few were detained, but it was a small number of them. The majority were able to be pushed, or police were able to push them to come back through the fence, and things remained peaceful. We haven't seen any deployment of tear gas or anything of that nature, but right now, actually, we're seeing a large number of more riot gear police over here.
Oh, wow.
As you can see, now we're talking about dozens of officers wearing these vests. So now this is what it looks like. They're going to be clearing this area where there's just a few protesters remaining from the thousands that had been there. We had heard some protesters say just a minute ago, okay, more police are coming. They're coming behind you. If you don't want to be part of a confrontation, leave now.
Yeah.
And of course, as we can see now, people are rushing there. A lot of what's happening here, of course, is media getting these images of the police in riot gear. This is historic memory from the 1968 protests. A lot of people have been saying, will it be a similar kind of confrontation of violence between protesters and police? And clearly, there's a lot of media that want to make sure that we don't miss any images, that police are respecting, as they said they would, people's freedom of speech. But as they have been saying, as the mayor has been saying, they're not going to tolerate violence or vandalism. And of course, a breaching of the fence is considered vandalism. We are, of course, standing by here, seeing what will happen, but this is a large number of officers who have been trained on de-escalation, who have been following what the mayor, what the superintendent has been saying, that they want to protect people's rights of freedom of speech, their rights to protest, and people have done so far for the very most part, or entirely peacefully. But, you know, as the night progresses, we've covered many of these protests. Anything can happen, and we'll continue to monitor. But right now, where we are, the police presence is far, far greater.
That's right. And this is just day one. Lilia Luciano on the ground for us there. Thank you so much. Right. Now back to inside the convention center. Democrats are about to gavel in night one of the Democratic National Convention. As you can see there, the party nominated Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz, in a virtual roll call earlier this month. Harris will formally accept the presidential nomination on Thursday. Let's listen in for a second.
In a true act of patriotism, he passed the torch to the next generation and the next president of the United States, Kamala Harris. As convention chair, I may appoint officers to assist in the conduct of our proceedings. It is my honor to announce the following convention officers. Assisting as co-chairs are Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, Mayor Mitch Landrieu, Senator Cory Booker, and Congresswoman Veronica Escobar. Our convention parliamentarians will be former House Majority Whip Steny Hoyer, Broderick Johnson, and DNC parliamentary Helen McFadden. Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo, and Congressman Ted Lieu will serve as Sergeant-at-Arms. Louis Terrell will serve as our book doorkeeper, and Congresswoman Barbara Lee will serve as our timekeeper. I'd now like to turn it over to my friend, Chairman Harrison.
Thank you, Mignon. Hello, Democrats. The Democratic Party is 196 years old. It's the oldest active political party in the world. Every person here is a part of a movement that brings America closer to our goal of a more perfect union. And every convention is a moment. It's a moment that contributes to our movement. It's moments like 60 years ago, when Fannie Lou Hamer told the shocking story of the racist brutality she suffered simply for registering to vote. Or 52 years ago, when Shirley Chisholm ran a historic race for the presidential nomination. Or 40 years ago, when a round-headed boy from South Carolina, the same before you today, watched Reverend Jesse Jackson challenge America to hope and to dream. Folks, all of these moments led us to this transformational moment when a black convention chair and a black DNC chair lead us in nominating a black and AAPI woman to be the next president of the United States. Folks, this is because the Democratic Party is and always will be for the people, for our future. We are honored to be a part of American history as we gavel in this convention and celebrate this historic nomination. I would like to thank the incredible workers at this year's convention, the convention staff led by the amazing Alex Hornbrook, and our convention chair, Mignon Moore, and my amazing staff at the DNC. You quite literally set the stage for us today, and we wouldn't be here without all of you.
All right, you were listening to Minion Moore. She's the convention chair, as well as James Harrison, the DNC chair, talking about the history of the Democratic Party, saying it's 196 years old, and it is and always will be, starting off that gavel and saying, for the people, for our future. We will have more on the top speeches and what to look for as coverage continues throughout the night. The Biden administration launched a new program today that would help a specific group of immigrants gain citizenship. It's called Keeping Families Together. Announced back in June, it will offer legal status to nearly 500,000 who are married to American citizens. Some children who have U.S. citizens as parents are also eligible. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us now from Arizona. Camilo, again, always a pleasure to have you on this broadcast. What requirements are necessary for immigrants to qualify for this program?
Hi, Jerika. This will be the biggest immigration program created by the executive branch since that 2012 DACA program for so-called Dreamers created by the Obama administration at the time. And to qualify, undocumented immigrants must be married to a U.S. citizen. They also must have lived here in the U.S. continuously for at least 10 years, a decade, and they must importantly pass background checks to make sure that they do not pose a threat to either national security or public safety. Importantly, according to policy guidance issued just today, immigrants who are convicted of any felony will be ineligible for the process, and those who have other criminal records will be adjudicated. Their cases will be adjudicated on a case-by-case basis. And again, this is, as you mentioned, something that could benefit up to 500,000 undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens. They will be allowed to apply for temporary work permits and deportation protections, but perhaps more importantly, this will also allow these eligible immigrants who are married to U.S. citizens to apply for green card status or permanent residence here in the U.S. without having to leave the country. Right now, many of them have to actually leave the country, go back to their home country, and then come back legally to get a green card, a process that can actually trigger a 10-year ban from the U.S. because they have lived here in the country illegally for some time. This process will prevent that from happening and will allow these immigrants to get that green card without having to leave the country. After immigrants get a green card, Jerika, they can apply for U.S. citizenship after several years.
What are some of the criticisms? Because, as you know, people might hear that and think, oh, you're making it easier. They're not going through the proper protocols. But this program has obviously been set up because, for good reason, it's been well-researched before they put it out. But what are some of the criticisms and legal challenges that this proposal faces?
It's a good question, Jerika, because while the Biden administration and advocates believe that this policy promotes family unity and promotes the integration of immigrant households here in the U.S. who have a U.S. citizen member, Republicans and Republican-led states have said that this is an amnesty, that this is rewarding illegal immigration, that this will encourage more people to come to the border. It is important to underscore, Jerika, that this does not benefit recent arrivals. It only benefits, again, people who are married to U.S. citizens and who have lived here for at least 10 years. But the argument from the Republican side is that this rewards illegal immigration because it is benefiting people here who are in the country unlawfully. It is also important to note that this is likely to be challenged in federal court by states like Texas and other Republican-led states that have challenged virtually every single major immigration action by the Biden administration.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if people would just kind of stay in the shadows, if you will, as concerns continue in terms of possible legal challenges. Camilo Montoya Galvez in Arizona, thank you. Coming up, SpaceX is getting ready for a risky mission. It involves traversing the Earth's radiation belts and testing out new spacesuits. We'll explain all of that and some of the objectives. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
4 people arrived at the Kennedy Space Center today to prepare for a historic but really risky mission. That mission has been dubbed Polaris Dawn. The crew is set to leave next Monday on a SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule and spend 5 days in space. The goal is to try to conduct the first ever private spacewalk, but that's not all. The crew is aiming to travel higher altitudes than the Apollo program, cross paths with a radioactive belt, and test some new SpaceX suits. They're pretty cool, too. CBS News space consultant Bill Hartwood joins me now. Bill, great to see you. So what are some of the risks of this mission? Let's get that out of the way first.
Well, sure. They're a little bit higher than they would normally be for a SpaceX Crew Dragon mission, you know, the kind of flights that carry astronauts to and from the International Space Station. As you say, they're going to go higher than anyone has gone since the Apollo program. Of course, the Apollo crews went further. They went all the way to the moon. But these guys are going to get up to an altitude of about 870 miles. That's well above the altitude of the International Space Station, which orbits at around 260 miles. And so they are going to be exposed to the Van Allen radiation belts. But remember, this is a short duration flight. It's only going to last about 5 days. So the radiation that they will receive during those 5 days is still much less than the crew on the International Space Station gets over 6 months. So, yeah, it's more risky, I think, than a standard SpaceX Crew Dragon mission, but not all that much. And then when you throw in the spacewalk, well, that's a different ballgame. You know, you've got a brand new suit, as you mentioned, never been tried in the vacuum of space before. So that's going to be quite exciting to watch.
And they're kind of exciting to look at. What more can you tell us about those special suits from SpaceX?
Well, you know, actually, SpaceX designed these themselves. They're air-cooled. They don't have that complex liquid cooling system that the old suits that NASA uses has. And even with that, they tell us that these suits are good to go out, you know, in broad sunlight up in orbit or in the shadow of the Earth when the temperatures plunge to a couple of 100 degrees below zero. They say they're going to be fine. And remember, they'll be connected to their spacecraft at all times with oxygen umbilicals to keep anything from going wrong.
What is, again, the mission hoping to learn from all of this, and what comes next?
Well, they think that, testing these spacesuits is a really big deal. SpaceX has very ambitious plans well beyond NASA to explore the moon and on to Mars someday. They say they need new spacesuits to handle the number of people they envision going out into space someday. And they want to start testing the materials, the procedures, how you train for these spacewalks. It's very different from the way NASA does business. This is their first step in that regard. So it's a fairly modest step. They're not going to float free of the spacecraft, out there on their own. They'll still be anchored to the spacecraft during their spacewalk. But it's still pretty unusual. Remember, only the United States government, Russia, and China are able to do this sort of thing. This is the first time private citizens will attempt to do it themselves.
Right, and I have a feeling people will be using those SpaceX suits in a Halloween costume this October. Bill Harwood, thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Keep your eyes on the skies this week for a chance to see a rare super blue moon. It's rare because it's both a supermoon and a blue moon. Supermoons happen when the moon's orbit is closest to Earth, while a blue moon has nothing to do with color and is a term that usually just refers to the third full moon in a season that has four total. This lunar phenomenon will reach peak illumination tonight and continue shining brightly through Wednesday. It's the first of 4 consecutive supermoons. The next expected, mark your calendar, September 17th. We'll head back to the Democratic National Convention after the break, where President Biden will speak tonight. John Dickerson joins me next to discuss what Biden's passing of the torch signifies. Stay with us. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now, we got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A
CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Continue to follow the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Tonight, we'll hear from President Joe Biden. But before we go, let's turn it back over to John Dickerson with some final thoughts tonight. John?
Jerika, thank you. You can hear it in the hall here. The Democratic Convention, which starts today, is beginning with an ending. Joe Biden's final significant moment on the national stage. Here in Chicago, the phrase passing the torch is getting used a lot. It's not just that we're close to the Olympics. The phrase has a history in Democratic politics. John Kennedy used it at his inauguration.
Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans.
In that case, Kennedy was accepting a torch. Here in Chicago Monday, Biden will be handing one off. Some have called the term passing the baton, but that's actually something different. And the difference in those two phrases highlights what is unique about this political transition. Passing a baton marks a stage in a race. Passing the torch is something more profound. The torch in ancient Greece represented traditions and ideals, kindled, protected, and passed on. The ideals and traditions Joe Biden stands for are the ones that defined his more than 50 years in office, and of which he is one of the last representatives in Washington. In domestic politics, it's a belief in the legislative process, the value of politics and bipartisanship as a good that encourages compromise. In foreign affairs, it represents a belief in diplomacy and alliances when it comes to protecting America's interests overseas. As Biden speaks in Chicago, he may be helping his party win the next race, but there is a larger question. Will his party's new leader be able to carry forward the ideals that have defined Biden's long career? Will this moment mark not just the close of a political career, but a further fading of the principles that have guided it? Thank you for watching. A special edition of America Decides begins after the break. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why? You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis? You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened? Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued